Good morning, everybody, and welcome back. My name is Andy Bicking. I'm the Director of Government Relations and Public Policy for Scenic, Hudson, and thrilled to be here with all of you today to discuss the importance of natural and working lands as part of a meaningful climate solution. Our next panel is about a discussion on state action and potential federal collaboration. Just to give you some context, on Thursday, President Biden set a new target for the United States to achieve a more than 50% reduction from 2005 levels in economy-wide net greenhouse gas pollution by 2030, including emissions from forests and agriculture and enhancing carbon sinks. So very germane to today's discussion. The president has also proposed to conserve 30% of the nation's open spaces, including forests and other reserves and agricultural lands by the year 2030 as central to his climate strategies. In this session, we will be discussing how these proposals create opportunities for state action and federal collaboration with two of our nation's leading thinkers on this issue. We're very pleased to be joined today by Dr. Barbara Glenn, who had joined the National Association of State Departments in Agriculture as CEO in 2014. NASDA, as some of you may know, is a nonpartisan, nonprofit association which represents the elected and appointed commissioners, secretaries, and directors of the Departments of Agriculture in all 50 states and 4 U.S. territories. Dr. Glenn is a scientist with decades of experience as a researcher, policy leader, and advocate for agriculture. She previously held leadership positions with CropLife America and the Biotechnology Innovation Organization in Washington, D.C. Earlier in her career, she led government affairs for the Federation of Animal Science Societies, conducted dairy cattle nutrition research for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and was the first woman to serve as president of the American Society of Animal Science. Dr. Glenn holds a BS in animal science and a PhD in ruminant nutrition from the University of Kentucky, and has also stayed very true to her roots as an active volunteer on local boards for Farm Bureau 4-H and Ag Education. Our second panelist is Richard Ball, who has served as Commissioner of Agriculture for the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets since 2014. Richard began his career in agriculture at the age of 18, working on a vegetable farm in Rhode Island. For the past 25 years, he has been the proud owner and operator of Schoharie Valley Farms in Schoharie, New York. The family farm consists of 200 acres and produces a wide range of vegetable crops, small fruits, and greenhouse crops, and serves both retail and wholesale consumers through an on-site farm market. Richard has held a number of positions with agriculture and community organizations at the state, local, and national level, including the New York State Vegetable Growers Association, the New York Farm Bureau, the American Farm Bureau, and the Schoharie County Chamber of Commerce. He currently serves as second vice president of the National Association of State Department of Agriculture Board of Directors and on the association's Food Regulation Steering Committee. He is also the president of Food Export Northeast. Welcome, Commissioner Ball and Dr. Glenn. We're so glad to have you with us this morning. My first question is to Commissioner Ball. Commissioner, under the leadership of Governor Cuomo, New York State has advanced a bold and visionary goal to bring about an 85% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 through its Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. The law has created a Climate Action Council and Agriculture and Forestry Advisory Panel consisting of farmers, foresters, business groups, representatives from environmental organizations and academic institutions, all coming together to develop strategies to achieve this goal. From your perspective, and New York's perspective, what is the role of natural and working lands to advance this work, and what types of strategies are currently under consideration?
Well, thanks very much for that, Andy. And first of all, let me just say good morning. And let me just say thank you for this opportunity to be here. I have to thank Scenic, Hudson, and the Council of State Governments for your interest in the subject, certainly. Your agenda is very impressive. I've been taking notes all morning on the conversation, so glad to be a part. And let me just also back up and just say it's I'm heartened and grateful to be joined by Dr. Barbara Glenn. And let me just back up a little further to say, I get asked all the time as commissioner, do you talk with other commissioners from around the country? And the answer is a profound yes. We interact on a weekly basis, sometimes a daily basis. And I think this organization has become so relevant in Washington and so exciting to be a part of, because we meet with our federal partners and, kind of hence the subject today. I think we've become one of the more relevant partners in Washington, D.C. with regards to all things agriculture. So I think the excitement for me of the Climate Action Council, it feels like a lot of planets are starting to align here. Personally, on my own farm, I've seen 5 100-year events in the last 25 years. I've seen one 500-year event, so I don't think the topic is hard to avoid. I mean, it's in our face. But I do think that many of the efforts we've undertaken at the state level with regards to water quality and nutrient management have already put us kind of in the right thinking mode about healthy soils, et cetera. That's going to put us in a place where, from an agricultural standpoint, we can do more than get to net zero. We can actually, make things better. We can actually be a negative carbon enterprise. And certainly as we look around at all the other issues around climate, methane reduction, carbon sequestration, when you look at transportation, when you look at housing, when you look at power generation, when you look at energy intensive industries, we're in a very good place, and it's so important for us to be at the table here.
Thank you, Commissioner. And to kick things off on your front, Dr. Glenn, you've got such a unique perspective in uniting so many diverse interests across the sector over the course of your career and in your current position. And I noted recently that you helped convene the Food and Agricultural Climate Alliance to identify strategies that break through a lot of historic barriers in this field, and that have the support of farmers, foresters, environmentalists, industry experts in your association. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about this effort, the goals and the agenda for the Alliance, and the guiding principles that have contributed to such an effective big tent approach.
Well, thank you, Andy, and good morning, everybody. Congratulations on this amazing conference. And I also want to do a shout out and thank you to Scenic, Hudson, and CSG East for taking a chance on inviting me, but mostly it's my honor to be with one of my bosses at NASDA, Commissioner Ball, who shows amazing leadership. He currently is vice president of NASDA. So we're going to be in New York next year, Andy. So I wanted everyone to know that. Stay tuned. It'll be great, a great meeting. So indeed, we call it ourselves FACA as the Food and Ag Climate Alliance. And I would say, we are sort of a definition of the big tent at this point in time. The FACA members want to have a seat at the table as Congress and the Biden administration work on new climate policy solutions. And we fully recognize that our collective voice is stronger together than any one of us could be alone. So I'll share a few thoughts with you about the Food and Ag Climate Alliance. First of all, we have principles, as Andy referenced, and they are the following. The Alliance, there are 8 founding organizations, and we support voluntary incentive-based programs as solutions. We also want to advance science-based outcomes. So that's our second principle. And our third principle is really to promote resilience and help rural economies better adapt to climate change. We recently have recognized the fourth principle is really important, is to do no harm. So we want to protect farm conservation, crop insurance, and other credit programs. So this organization has put together, Andy, over 40 across 6 areas. It's very intense. We've been working together here. Areas include soil health, livestock, forest and wood products, energy, and food. And excited. We've got our comments almost ready. They're due soon to the USDA. We're really excited that Secretary Vilsack and you for input. And so this together grown to over 70 organizations. Intent voice of Congress and help the administration.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Glenn. It's really an amazing effort. And I just think about the work of your association and the Food and Ag Climate Alliance and all the work that's happening in the states around the country. And we just have so much potential here. We'll open it up for questions in just a moment, but want to encourage everyone to start putting them in the Q&A. I did have one or two other things I wanted to ask you to kind of help frame the discussion. The first is leaders and practitioners of agriculture also at different points in your career. I know you both appreciate the real work that needs to happen on the ground, literally where the plow meets the soil to achieve natural solutions and all the other important co-benefits of agriculture as well. And it's really these management decisions that are made on a day-to-day basis on farms and forests that will collectively achieve our goals. And in this sense, getting information out to practitioners, whether it is educational nature or technical expertise, is mission critical. And I'm curious, what role do soil and water conservation districts and other service providers have in this context? And just as a follow-up to that, what questions should states, the federal government consider to help these institutions evolve from their traditional and very important focus on water quality to also embrace soil health and carbon sequestration?
Yeah, it's an important question, Andy, for sure. Thank you for that. As you alluded to, I think some of the things we've been doing with regards to soils and water quality, et cetera, we've been utilizing the soil and water conservation districts more and more every year. There really are boots on the ground. They have the technical expertise. They've got the relationships in all our counties with all our farmers. And I think that that's going to be, as I mentioned, those planets starting to line up in a better way. That's a great example because we've already gone down environmental management efforts and healthy soils efforts and climate resiliency efforts, and the soil and water partners have been there. Now we're broadening that view to think about carbon and sequestration, and they really complement each other. These are co-benefits that we get from the programs we have in place. So as you know, we have a budget process in New York that's always entertaining and very busy. And I see as part of our job here is to make sure that we properly fund the soil and water conservation districts, because we ask more of them every single year. They're one of the most energetic and enthusiastic groups of people that I get to interact with around the state. They're going to be critical, mission critical as we go forward here.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. It appears that unfortunately we may have lost Dr. Glenn, I'm guessing due to some technical issues or bandwidth. I don't see her here on the list of panelists, but let me ask you kind of a follow-up question to that. With your experience with Barbara and her national organization, I'm familiar with some of the delivery mechanisms through SWCDs, et cetera, in New York State. But are these systems consistent throughout other states in the nation? Are there different models, or are there different opportunities to deliver these services to farmers that we need to be thinking about when we're crafting federal policies?
Just a quick footnote, Barb just texted me and said she's locked out. So maybe someone in the background can work on that a little bit. Yes, I think we've got in all the states some similarities with our soil and water district enterprises, and certainly extension enterprises around the state, around the country. But this is part of the strength of NASDA. We have an opportunity to speak together with one voice. With having NASDA part of the Food and Ag Climate Alliance, we have the opportunity to get that message across to all the state departments of ag. We're obviously all commissioners of all of ag in our states, not just one commodity or another. We're all tuned in here. We're all very, very anxious to see how this can be a part of going forward for the country and the world overall. So there's a great amount of enthusiasm across all. We're going to share notes. We do this every year. We do this every month about how it works best in our states, but there is a great commonality there. So I think we're going to be able to share our experiences.
Great, thank you. And we'll take a question from the Q&A right now, Commissioner, and it is coming from Assemblywoman Dee Dee Barrett in New York State. I know someone you've worked very closely with. She is asking, how do we balance the preservation of farms, farmland, and healthy soils, as well as wetland and natural habitats with large-scale solar farms? And how do we ensure the balance of community preservation with climate leadership as we work to achieve these targets?
That's a great question from my friend, Assembly Member Barrett, who's been a pioneer in New York with regards to carbon sequestration. We got started on some carbon projects in the Hudson Valley through her leadership. That's an important thing for us to discuss, because as we look at the overall goals for New York State, which involved certainly a growth in the green energy sector, solar, wind, et cetera, we have to be careful and think about our farmland in a big way. Fortunately, our relationship with our energy partners and state government, and in New York's case, it's NYSERDA. The president at NYSERDA, Doreen Harris, has come to understand our agricultural concerns. We talk often, and we've come to some agreements about making sure we prioritize our top 4 tiers of soil in New York State, that we prioritize currently farmed land in New York State. We certainly don't want to grow our energy sector at the expense of the agricultural sector. So it involves frequent conversations, daily conversations, and certainly we've had a great interest in solar and a great interest in solar enterprises. It's logical. They're going to look for an easy place to put up a solar array. They're going to look for flat ground, easy digging, et cetera. But we've, I think, conveyed the message and the point that our top 4 tiers of soil and current active growing farmland, producing farmland is something we need to avoid. We need to minimize the impact on, and we need to mitigate if there is a collision there. And I would just add a little bit further, we just went through a horrific year all around the world. If COVID-19 taught us anything, particularly here in New York State, it's the importance of having a food supply chain that's resilient. It's important to having a food supply chain that is local. We don't want to depend on another country, another region in the world for food, and certainly for all the necessaries that a pandemic might throw in our face. So I think this last year has taught us how important it is, what I just talked about, prioritizing our farmland and prioritizing that food supply system.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. That's a really great point you make about the importance of integrating, this work on natural and working lands and carbon sequestration with all of the other aspects of our food systems and our food economy. I think that would probably create the most durable results in the long run. And I'm curious, with so much discussion at the federal level around these issues, with most recently the American Rescue Plan, the proposed climate legislation, and of course, it's never too early to begin thinking about the 2023 Farm Bill. How can we be kind of thinking about working together as states or a region in the Northeast to communicate at a federal level how all of these systems are so interconnected? And are there experiences that you have had or policies that you could cite as models that might help us get to the place where we have an integrated approach at the federal level that seeks to empower states?
I do. Right now, we're not quite certain exactly what it's going to resemble. But I will say this, we see, first of all, what we're doing here today, what you have convened here today. I should point out, full disclosure, that Ned Sullivan is part of our Ag and Forestry work panel on the Climate Action Council here in New York. This forum right here is an important thing for us to exercise. Secondly, I would say that the Northeast commissioners, the 10 regional commissioners up here in the Northeast, we talk even more often than we do nationally because we share this region, we share commodities, and we share concerns about our agricultural industry in a big way. And I would say thirdly, that we're so fortunate to have the overall organization in NASDA who is carrying that message, because the message doesn't come from NASDA to commissioners. The message for the state association comes from the states. And our ability to talk with Secretary Vilsack on a regular basis, our ability to have Barb Glenn sit at the White House and have this conversation with the White House team, our ability to have the dialogue with all the agencies at USDA, who we talk with every week, is going to be critical to making sure we're aligned and on the same path. And I have to say, you know, I've been in Washington, D.C., you know, in the last month, almost 2 weeks, virtually, of course, and engaged in these very conversations. And I am just heartened to see the parallel tracks that what we are talking about here today and what's happening down there are following. I see Barb is back on, and
Gosh,
what a country.
please accept my apologies. I have never had Zoom just crash on me until today. So my apologies, Andy and Commissioner.
Oh, we certainly understand. And we're glad to have you back, Dr. Glenn. If you were able to take an extended break, we'll be sure to direct all the tough questions at you.
No. I could load on to, I think you're talking about policy and how to thread that needle, and I'm happy to add on. From NASDA's perspective, we're just really glad to see the emphasis on states, on local solutions, on regional solutions. And, you know, I mentioned earlier, we're very happy that President Biden has focused on agriculture and that USDA has invited our comments regarding how we see climate smart agriculture. Those are due next week, and FACA, the Alliance, will be submitting, as will be NASDA. I think that, you know, the recognition that agriculture is an environmental solution is not a small point and needs to be raised by everyone in this room every day in front of your policy and other legislative decision makers. I think it's important. And we need to keep our eyes on the goal. We see farmers and ranchers are the innovators and adopters. And as long as we advance and recognize their past success and advance solutions that assist them, that is goal number one for policy. And number two really is to have research that goes into action. That is the foundation, we feel, of reaching net zero. And policymakers, along with us, we need to carry that mantra. From FACA's point of view, we're looking at policy to be developed by Congress and the administration that's strongly bipartisan. We feel like that's a core competency we all need to strive for. And I enjoy talking across the aisle all the time. NASDA is a nonpartisan organization. Commissioner Ball serves extremely well as a voice of our united voices across the state. So bipartisanship is important. And we think that policy should be developed for all of agriculture in mind, regardless of the size and all of that diversity on the types of production methods, the commodities. There really is no silver bullet or one size fits all solution. And then lastly, we see policy should provide revenue generating opportunities for producers as opposed to increased costs. And I think that will go a long way to the previous question you had, and that is to collectively change our behavior, have the ability for farmers to desire and trust to take on these climate smart practices, and with reduced risk to them, but also with the promise that it will actually improve soil health and et cetera. So long answer. Hope that fit the question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to pick up on this thread of bipartisanship. I think it's so important. And I know one of the things that I've learned as an advocate working on this issue is that there are just so many different points of view about climate in general. And so much of what we need to do, I think, is really develop some language and way of talking about this issue that works for people of all political persuasions, level of knowledge, comfort levels, and it's really cultural. It's a cultural issue, and one of the key things that I have noticed to be very effective is to be about the co-benefits of investing in natural and working lands. That there's a lot of things we can achieve through them that are related to climate change, but also many other important issues. And comment on that and where either of you may see opportunities to bring together diverse political and community perspectives on common sense, science-based solutions.
Commissioner, go ahead, please.
I have to say, Andy, since day one for me, when the governor first reached out to me and asked me if I would consider being Commissioner of Ag, we never discussed politics once. We never talked about parties once. It's been about food. It's been about, in the case of New York State, we rank in the top 10 of 30 different commodities. We've got the best land grant system for ag education in the country. We've got great resources, access to water, good land, good farmers. We figure in every national discussion about ag. It's about connecting the dots between that group of agriculturalists and the biggest, most diverse marketplace anywhere in the world. So I think we have to focus on that. We can't think along partisan lines at all. The climate and the changes and the dramatic things that we're seeing in climate all across the world, all across the United States, and certainly here in New York, have no regard for whether you wear a red shirt or a blue shirt or any other shirt. We're about food, we're about resiliency, we're about connecting food supply chain in a better way, from those who produce it to those who need it, need access to it. So I've been very fortunate when I go into the Capitol, colleagues on both sides of the aisle want to understand the food system and want to be a part of a solution and want to see agriculture grow and want to see it thrive in the state because it's such a vital part of our economy. I think, Barb, you see it from the federal level, certainly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with everything Commissioner Ball said. Just this past week, of course, the Global Climate Solutions Act, the bipartisan bill was introduced, and NASDA and the Climate Alliance that we're a member of, we supported that strongly. And so there's an example of reaching across the aisle. We can do this. So I think that set a good marker for us. Again, for NASDA, I think it's keeping, to have the diversity of our politics and our community work together. I think it's keeping our eyes on two things. That is recognizing that farmers, make these contributions every day and will make them in the future. So that means we have to have something that keep our eyes on the farmers and the fact that they need our partnership. It's our moral responsibility to work together. So NASDA fully, wholeheartedly believes in partnerships. Commissioner Ball has shown over the past year and beyond how critical the new diverse partnerships are. So that's number one. I would say secondly, though, one of the things we can do across that diversity, I would choose to believe, is that it's about the science, and measuring success of a farming practice does require validation of the impacts, and consumers want confidence in this process and these policies. And if we choose to work together to realize that science is measuring and validating these improvements in climate resiliency, I think that's key. From NASDA's point of view, the states are supporting the research as demonstration projects and pilot projects in that regard. So I look forward in the Northeast region. I know there are already massive public-private partnerships with your land grant and other universities and your state departments of agriculture. So we think that is critical. That provides the data that's needed for big modeling approaches. And again, it sort of gets back to my other point. We have to have research that's put into action and keep our eyes on the farmer. The benefit goes to them. So I'm hopeful that, again, being our moral responsibility to come together with that, we will continue to do so. And the Global Climate Solutions Act is a great example this week.
You know, that's a really great segue to a question that's come in the Q&A from Josie Gordon, who writes, our goals are for 2030. According to other panelists, we're just starting to accurately measure carbon capture. Still, legislation has to be put into place. Farmers and others need to start this process. And you know, she points out that 2030 is only 9 years away. And she is asking, you know, what needs to happen by the end of this year for us to reach our goals? And how can the regular American keep track of some of this progress so we can all stay informed and be supportive of these efforts?
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I'm reminded of something that my grandfather always said to me. And that was, you know, the best time to plant a tree is 10 years ago.
Yes.
The second best time is today. And so I have to say, we got to get to work. I mean, we've got a lot of catching up to do. There's no question about it. We find ourselves with this emerging problem. But I don't hear a lot of people denying that we have a challenge. I'm heartened when I, you know, participate in conversations in Washington, D.C. with USDA, with the White House, when I have conversations here in New York, when I have conversations with all our ag commodity groups around the state. We're getting on the same page here in a big way. And then, as Barb referenced, the science and the technology and the quantification and the measurements, we've got to move very quickly here. I don't think anyone disputes that. So what needs to happen is we need to step on the gas pedal here, if you'll pardon that terrible pun. And we need to really advance our efforts and double down on our efforts. But I see the will to do that across the ag sector, across our legislature here in New York, and from the federal level. I see the willingness to do that. I think when we all point in the same direction, the rest of the world will turn around to see what we're all pointing at. And I think we can make some real progress here. So redoubling our efforts and just what we're doing today.
Yeah, very well said by Commissioner. I do feel like there's a very high sense of urgency for agriculture. We know we're part of the solution. We can take us, as Commissioner said earlier, to what we'll call below net zero. We're a carbon sink. We're also a contributor to all the co-benefits, Andy, that you referenced. I think we'll start talking more about the whole package rather than just the carbon. And I think that's good. So yes, it's only 9 years away. We have done a lot of spade work to date. I think we just have to keep pressing forward with the political side, the policy side, our strong relationship of states with the federal agencies. And I would say, how do regular Americans keep track? You know, each of us has somewhat of a responsibility to value our food and where it comes from, but also to be that citizen scientist, if you will. Let's follow this conversation. Your voice to your legislator is a big part of this equation. If we're going to reach President Biden's goal to 2030, we can do that, but everybody in this room has a responsibility. So let's work together. And NASDA and our state departments of ag, our members, they want to work with you. So I would call Commissioner right after this.
Yeah, I would just thank you, Barb. Well said. And I would just add that we've got a couple of head starts here in New York State. We really do. We've had significant funding for our Environmental Protection Fund. We've already got a climate resiliency effort in place here. We've already got ag non-point work happening around the state. We already have our AIM plan, our nutrient management plan for farms. We even made that part of our marketing program in New York, run and certified now. So we've got a lot of key things that supply the co-benefits, which we can broaden out now to include carbon and climate initiatives. So we have a little bit of a head start here, particularly with regards to the ag and forestry sectors.
Great. So we do have another question coming in relating back to soil and water conservation districts, and really the opportunity to deliver technical expertise to the people on the ground who are doing the work. Do you see any opportunities for interstate action to strengthen the roles of these delivery institutions? And what actions might be included to help facilitate that, whether through interstate collaboration or through federal policy?
Well, I know Barb's going to ask me to go first again, so I
Yes,
will.
of course.
I absolutely see, we all come together through USDA when it comes to NRCS, when it comes to land conservation practices, et cetera. And if you think back in the past week, we heard the president speak to this and we heard Secretary Vilsack speak to this. So there are programs there that we utilize in every one of our states to get funding to do the technical work through the Soil and Water Conservation District model, through the extension models. So advocating in a strong way, in our case, through the state departments of agriculture is going to be key. And the funding streams that the federal government can encourage to encourage the right behavior in all our states is going to be a very key component. We've got to be in partnership with the federal programs. We've got to look to streamline and align those efforts.
I think Commissioner Ball is right on target. The big answer to your question is that strong federal and state partnership that we aspire for. We call it cooperative federalism. But I would also say these third parties and their contribution locally, of course, is the basis for having that interstate action, as the question was derived. And so whether it's a certified crop advisor or the soil and water conservation districts, NRCS representatives, they are at the core. So how do we devise an action like through a region across states? We might point to the Chesapeake Bay initiatives down here in the Delmarva, where I live in Maryland, as being an example of what can be done regionally. I don't know that it's the gold standard, but I will suggest that that has some lessons learned on how we can work together regionally for enhancing our natural and working lands. So that's a great question. And I would love to see in the Northeast, who all of you work together well from a NASDA perspective. I would love to see us challenge ourselves and have that interstate action, because we don't have endless resources. So if we can work together on policies and programs, pull in our extension people and our universities, of course, and just be smart about all this. That would be a great mind map to draw, Commissioner.
It would. I will say that just 2 days ago, I had the opportunity to be a part of the Upper Susquehanna Coalition at the invitation of Secretary Bartenfelter from Maryland, and it was obviously Delaware and Pennsylvania and New York and Delaware, and we all joined together for a conversation, which we do every year, to talk about the Chesapeake and the initiatives there. Yep. And in partnership with us on that conversation was EPA, was USDA and their various agencies. And it was a healthy several-hour dialogue about, okay, what are all the states doing? What is the federal state partnership look like in this space? Those are the kind of things that we need to do on a regular basis. So, and we are.
It also makes me just want to end on a final question here in the 2 minutes we have remaining. And something that you both alluded to is that we're trying to advance this work and make decisions in what will probably always be constrained resources on some level. The vision that we have is, probably is a big appetite, and that suggests that collaboration, interstate, state, federal is important. But one of the other big sectors is the private sector here, and we've heard from a number of panelists over the course of this conference who have bringing different perspectives to bear in that context. And I'm wondering, as policymakers, when you think about a public-private partnership, what are some principles or ideas for how those can be structured in a way to achieve the big picture goals that we aspire to?
Well, I'll try to be brief, so because I know you only got a couple minutes left. But first of all, if you're going to embark on something as aggressive as what we're talking about here today, you first have to value that, and you got to value it at a high level. We all make value decisions every day when we go to the grocery store, when we buy, houses and vehicles, and we make a value decision, and we have to value this and uplift that value. Secondly, I would use it as an example, a group that we've worked with here in New York, and I know at NASDA level as well. I'll just give you an example, the Sustainable Food Funders. There's a group of philanthropists who have interest in the food system. We need to have a relationship with these people. We need to be talking. As much as we're in so many food businesses and enterprises, we're in the relationship business. We got to get everybody at the table and have those conversations, because where there's a will, there's a way. Where there's a value attached, there is a way. Barb?
I totally agree with Commissioner Ball. I think COVID has taught us and shown us how resilient we are in making up public-private partnerships. And I was going to mention philanthropy as well. The Sustainable Ag Food System Funders are our core partner with NASDA, and we have collectively learned a lot together. So it's about having a united goal, mutual respect, and trying to find a path forward, I think, that's equal and equitable. So I think the new conversations on equity are an important component of finding our way forward in these new partnerships, but we can do it. We can do it.
Great. Well, this has been so exciting and so inspiring. I want to thank you both for your time and sharing your expertise with all of us today. Certainly look forward to taking next steps. And with that, I will turn the podium back over to Ned Sullivan from Scenic Hudson to introduce our final discussion of the day. Ned?